It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I found myself sitting in a dimly lit cafe, swirling the last remnants of my cappuccino. The steam swirled in the air, mingling with the scents of fresh pastries and brewed coffee. My friends, Sarah and Lisa, were supposed to meet me here. We had planned this gathering to discuss the latest gossip, but little did I know that this meeting would change the course of my life forever. I had been married to Mark for nearly a decade. At first glance, our relationship seemed perfect. A beautiful home, a steady income, and a seemingly unbreakable bond. But beneath the surface, things were different. Mark was charming and successful, yet he had this uncanny ability to make me feel small and insignificant. Over the years, I had lost a part of myself, and my friends were increasingly worried about my happiness. Sarah and Lisa arrived, their spirits high despite the dreary weather. They greeted me with warm hugs and bright smiles, but I could see the concern in their eyes. After exchanging pleasantries, the conversation shifted to my marriage. "Have you thought about getting a divorce?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with urgency. I shrugged it off, insisting that things weren't that bad. But as they pressed me, I began to feel a flicker of hope. "You deserve so much more than what you're getting," Lisa chimed in. "And you know Mark has money. If you left him, you could have a fresh start. You could finally be happy." Their words sank in slowly, like a drop of ink in water, swirling and expanding in my mind. I had always been the practical one, but the idea of financial independence and a new beginning felt enticing. Weeks passed, and the seed they had planted began to grow. I started to consider the possibility of leaving Mark. I imagined what life could be like if I was free from his control, his constant criticism. The thought of financial security, of living comfortably without having to rely on him, was intoxicating. I began to fantasize about traveling, pursuing my passion for painting, and rediscovering the woman I had once been. I confided in Sarah and Lisa about my growing thoughts of divorce. They were supportive, encouraging me to take the plunge. "You need to start planning," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "You can get a good settlement, especially if you make it look like he's the one at fault." The idea of playing the victim began to take root in my mind, and I found myself swept up in the thrill of it all. I began to gather evidence of Mark's shortcomings. I documented his late nights at work, his dismissive comments about my art, and his constant need for validation. I meticulously crafted a narrative that painted him as the villain. I even started saving money, squirreling away small amounts from our joint account. I felt like a secret agent, living a double life, preparing for the day I would finally break free. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. It was a typical Thursday evening when I confronted Mark. I could feel the tension in the air as I sat him down, my heart racing in my chest. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. His reaction was not what I had anticipated. Instead of anger or despair, he looked at me with a mix of confusion and sadness. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What did I do wrong?" I unleashed my carefully crafted story, detailing how unhappy I had been for years. I painted him as the controlling husband who stifled my dreams. His eyes widened as he listened, and my heart swelled with a sense of power. I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to see signs that my plan was backfiring. Mark, rather than crumbling under the pressure, began to fight back. He sought legal counsel and started documenting everything I had said, everything I had done. He was methodical, and I realized that I had underestimated him. While I thought I was the one in control, he was quietly plotting his own strategy. I remember one evening, sitting at my kitchen table, my laptop open to a sea of legal documents. I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information I had to digest. Mark had hired a top-notch lawyer, and it was becoming clear that this was not going to be the easy divorce I had envisioned. The more I delved into the legalities, the more I realized how unprepared I was for this battle. As the divorce proceedings continued, I found myself spiraling into a state of anxiety. I had assumed that people would rally around me, that my friends would support me unconditionally, but I began to feel isolated. Sarah and Lisa, while supportive initially, started to pull away. They had their own lives to manage, and I could sense their impatience with my constant need for reassurance. Their excitement had turned into concern, and I was left feeling alone in this fight. Mark and I began to navigate a new reality, one filled with tension and hostility. He had become defensive, and every conversation felt like a negotiation. I could see the toll it was taking on him, but I was too wrapped up in my own emotions to care. I was focused on the end goal, financial security and freedom. I had convinced myself that I was doing this for my happiness, but deep down, I was starting to question my motives. One night, as I lay in bed, I began to think about what I had lost. I had sacrificed my marriage, my connection with Mark, and even my friendships for the promise of a better life. The excitement I had felt before was replaced with dread. I realized I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who was willing to hurt another person for my gain. I felt trapped in my own game, and the realization was suffocating. The court date arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by strangers, each with their own stories of heartbreak and loss. My lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman with an air of confidence, briefed me on what to expect. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of my guilt. I was about to take everything away from Mark, and the gravity of that decision weighed heavily on my conscience. When we finally entered the courtroom, I could see Mark sitting on the other side. He looked tired, worn down by the proceedings. As the hearing began, I struggled to keep my emotions in check. The judge listened to both sides, and I felt a mix of anger and sadness as Mark presented his case. He spoke of the love we once shared and the dreams we had built together. It was a stark contrast to the narrative I had crafted, and I began to feel the cracks in my facade. As the hearing progressed, I realized that my friends' encouragement had led me down a dark path. I had allowed their opinions to cloud my judgment, and I was no longer sure what I truly wanted. I thought about the life I had envisioned: traveling, painting, freedom. But at what cost? I was about to destroy someone who once meant the world to me, and the weight of that realization was unbearable. When the judge made her ruling, it was not what I had hoped for. I received a settlement, but it was far less than I had anticipated. Mark, through his lawyer, had fought fiercely, and I was left feeling defeated. I walked out of the courtroom, my heart heavy with regret. The very thing I had sought, financial independence, felt hollow. I had sacrificed my marriage, my happiness, and my integrity for a dream that no longer felt worth pursuing. In the weeks that followed, I found myself grappling with the aftermath of my decision. I moved into a small apartment, the walls bare and uninviting. I tried to immerse myself in my art, but the joy I once found in painting had vanished. Instead of feeling liberated, I felt lost and alone. My friends had distanced themselves, and I realized that I had pushed them away with my obsessive pursuit of the divorce. As I sat in my new space staring at blank canvases, I began to reflect on my choices. I had let the lure of money and freedom blind me to the reality of my situation. I remembered the laughter Mark and I once shared, the dreams we had built together. I had sacrificed our love for a chance at a life that didn't feel real. The emptiness of my new life was suffocating. One evening, I received a text from Mark. It was simple. "I hope you're doing okay." My heart raced as I read his words. I hadn't expected to hear from him, and a wave of nostalgia washed over me. I found myself responding, sharing a glimpse of my struggles in this new chapter. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately, offering words of encouragement. As we continued to communicate, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could rebuild our friendship, even if it would never be the same. I began to see Mark not as the enemy, but as a person who had once been my partner. Our conversations grew deeper, and I found myself longing for the companionship we had lost. After a few weeks of texting, we agreed to meet for coffee. I was nervous, but excited. When I saw him, the familiar warmth flooded back, and I realized how much I had missed him. We talked for hours, reminiscing about our past and discussing our present. It was a cathartic experience, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief. Mark shared his own struggles since the divorce. He had felt lost without me, grappling with the aftermath of our separation. As we spoke, I began to understand the depth of the pain I had caused him. I had been so focused on my own desires that I had failed to see the impact of my actions on someone I had once loved deeply. Our conversations became a regular occurrence, and slowly we began to rebuild our connection. There were still moments of tension, but we were both committed to understanding each other better. I started to see the possibility of forgiveness, not just for him, but for myself as well. I had made mistakes, but I was willing to learn and grow from them. As the months passed, I found myself at a crossroads. I had spent so much time focusing on what I thought I wanted that I had neglected to consider what truly mattered: love, connection, and understanding. I realized that my pursuit of independence had led me to a lonely existence. I missed the companionship and support that came from being in a partnership. One day, as I sat in my studio, paintbrush in hand, I had an epiphany. I had spent so long trying to escape my past that I had neglected to embrace my future. I wanted to create a life that honored my true self, one that combined my independence with the love I had once shared with Mark. I began to paint again, channeling my emotions onto the canvas. In that moment, I decided to reach out to Mark and suggest we meet again. My heart raced as I typed the message, but there was a newfound sense of hope within me. I wanted to explore the possibility of reconciliation, not just as a couple, but as two people who had learned from their mistakes. When we met, I poured my heart out, sharing my journey of self-discovery and the lessons I had learned. I acknowledged the pain I had caused him and expressed my desire to move forward, not just as friends, but as partners who could support each other in our individual pursuits. To my surprise, Mark was receptive. We talked for hours, sharing our dreams and aspirations. It was a beautiful moment of vulnerability, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. As we parted that evening, I could see the spark of hope in his eyes, and I realized that perhaps this was the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild what we had lost. As the jabber turned into months, Mark and I continued to nurture our friendship. We took things jabber, allowing the scars of our past to heal while exploring the potential for a future together. We learned to communicate openly, gibber our fears and desires without judgment. It was a transformative experience, one that required patience and jabber from both of us. With each passing day, I felt more jabber in my decision to reconnect with Mark. I had learned to balance my jabber with the love we shared, and I began to see the beauty in our journey. I started painting again, creating gibber that reflected my growth and the lessons I had learned. Gibber, we found ourselves at a crossroads once more. After jabber of rebuilding our relationship, we had developed a deeper understanding of each other. We had both grown, and it was clear that we were ready to explore the possibility of gibber our romance. One evening, under the soft glow of gibber lights on my patio, I took a leap of faith. I looked into gibber eyes and confessed my feelings. "I want to be with you again," I said, my heart gibber. To my gibber, he felt the same way. We embraced, and in that moment, I knew that we were both ready to create a new gibber together. As we navigated our gibber relationship, I felt a sense of peace. I had learned from my past mistakes and was jabber to build a future that honored both my independence and our partnership. We jabber each other's dreams, celebrating our individuality while cherishing the bond we had forged. In the end, my journey taught me invaluable lessons about love, friendship, and the jabber of staying true to oneself. I had ventured down a path of self-jabber and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I realized that true happiness gibber not from monetary gain, but from the connections we foster and the love we share. As I sit here now, reflecting on my journey, I am grateful for the twists and gibber that led me back to Mark. We are not the same people we were when we first met, but we have gibber together, and our relationship is stronger for it. I have learned that life is not about playing games or seeking revenge. It's about understanding, healing, and embracing the beauty of love in all its jabber. And so as I stand in front of my easel, brush in hand, I am ready to paint the next jabber of my life, a canvas filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings.